Today, we're going to go over the top 5 myths about IBD and IBD nutrition. So let's dive in. And before we start, I'm Ashley.
And hello, I'm Danielle.
We are the Crohn's and Colitis dietitians. This is our favorite topic, IBD nutrition, and we are also IBD patients ourselves, and we love to help other people like ourselves. So let's dive into number 1. So this is certainly my favorite. The top number 1 myth is that you can't have fiber.
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah, and what's very interesting, so we were going to put an ebook that we have below on this topic that we dove into how you can actually reduce symptoms with fiber and how to navigate and bridge the gap between the things that we know are gut friendly but are also difficult to digest and difficult to navigate. What's interesting is if you were to look online, and there's a lot of reputable sources online that might cite a low residue or low fiber diet as potentially a way to navigate IBD, but it's really not meant to be a long-term strategy. In fact, there are no reputable organizations or scientific studies that would advocate for this as a long-term solution for symptoms with IBD. We really have to find ways to help people beyond just that immediate, symptom management and more into like long-term strategies that will actually encourage better gut health and reduce risk of flare-ups.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is something we talk about quite frequently on this page. So if you're hearing this for the, 17th time, I apologize. But if you're hearing this for the first time, I'm so glad that you are listening. Fiber is one of those things that is going to be so beneficial for one's health. There's 2 main different types of fibers, the soluble fibers, which can be less irritating for someone's gut, and the insoluble fibers that have the potential to be more irritating, but adjusting the particle size of them can decrease that. And not forgetting that you can build your tolerance to fibers. We'll link a video on IBD triggers and explaining that a little bit more in depth too. But fiber is our friend, and working with us, we can help you have less fear around it. So we want this lovely fiber in our life.
And the reason why we want it is we know that consumption of it is associated with a 40% less likelihood of developing flare-ups. And the reason for that is your gut bacteria, the really helpful gut bugs, they tend to consume the foods that we eat, like fibers, and produce beneficial things as a response to that, like butyrate. So butyrate can help with reducing inflammation, and at a very basic level, can help with reducing inflammation as well as repair in the gut. So we know that fiber is very important, but it doesn't get a lot of thorough conversation. But again, visit some of the resources below if you want kind of a deeper dive into that one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go into number 2. So number 2 is that, so this is one of those hear me out conversations, because I think at least half of you listening are going to hear what I'm saying and maybe be surprised, shocked, or maybe even insulted that we brought it up just based on experience, but that you can't have popcorn and spicy food. Now, it's a hear me out because there are some scenarios where you may not want to do that. Like, for example, if you have active strictures and there's things that you're monitoring, yes, you may not want to be consuming things that may be problematic. But if we're looking at IBD as a whole, when those things are not present, you can absolutely have those things just fine. And, with the spicy food, it is variable person to person as to what you can tolerate. But in terms of it impacting inflammation, it doesn't necessarily cause any inflammation or harm, but might be more of one of those symptom triggers.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I put sriracha on a lot of things, so it'd be a sad day without that.
Yeah, and I'm from New Mexico, and I love Mexican food. I love using spice in cooking. But again, I've had some flavors where I can tolerate spicy food just fine, and I've had other flavors where, I'm very limited on what I can eat. But that part is very variable person to person.
Is there any evidence to say that you can build your tolerance to spice? I believe that you can, but I don't actually know what the science says.
Well, I guess the way I view it is a lot of foods, you can have so many different responses to a food, right? There's so many different reasons why we might not tolerate something. And definitely when it comes to fibers and when it comes to tolerating foods, the state of your gut plays a role in how well you tolerate something. whether or not you malabsorb certain aspects of the food can play a role. What we practice and encourage a lot of times when working with people is helping people to build up tolerance and to kind of slowly be able to reintroduce things and starting at a very basic level. But yeah, so I guess it's multifaceted is when it comes to a food response and if we can build tolerance to it. But I would say for the most part, it falls into the category of yes. Now, there might be exceptions to that, but I think we can build tolerance with all sorts of foods.
Which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with popcorn, it's kind of interesting because I did not know how widespread this popcorn thought is that we can't have it until I posted something on Instagram once of me making a popcorn snack. and then I got so many comments that are like, how could you say that? Like, how could you show yourself doing that? You're encouraging people. And it was kind of a shocker to me because I just didn't know that. I didn't know people had such a strong response to thinking that you can't have it.
Mm-hmm. I think that was my second GI. He's, when asked what to eat for IBD, he was just like, oh, whatever you want, just don't have popcorn.
It's like, yeah, I wonder where that comes from too. I know sometimes people will get diverticulitis confused with IBD, thinking the pockets that are produced in diverticulosis are also present in IBD, which they're not, unless you have an overlapping of both. But yeah, I'm not sure where the idea comes from. And of course, how you prepare popcorn too can play into how symptomatic and what the effect is too.
What's our next myth?
Next myth is if you don't have symptoms, that you don't have inflammation. So this is a widespread talked about thing because especially when you look at diets like carnivore diet, for example, where you have a lot of anecdotal evidence and comments and forums where people are talking about, we don't need research. The proof is in the experience that, I'm not symptomatic. But as healthcare providers, what we can see on the back end is when we work with these patients, we can see all the evidence of, hey, this is not a good long-term sustainable diet. Not just carnivore. There's many other popular diets that even though it decreased symptoms for someone, it didn't actually improve their gut health and didn't actually improve inflammatory markers. And the same is true, like you and I have talked about, you can eliminate all sorts of stuff and reduce your symptoms. That doesn't mean it's a good diet. Like, someone could be eating next to nothing and have not a lot of symptoms because they're not eating much. But we know that's not a good setup because you're, headed towards malnutrition and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So for people listening, that's one of the biggest reasons why we want to be mindful of cutting all of these foods out. We don't want to become malnourished because when you're malnourished, not only are you missing out on key nutrients to help your body, but you could be doing more harm and getting your body into a more undesirable state to not help your body fight what it's going through.
Yeah. And we also know you don't respond as well to meds. This is stuff we know about how important nutrition is. And you want to be able to have a good immune response to medication. And people that are more nourished will have a better response than someone who's, a lot more lacking in a lot of things.
Yeah. When it comes to any extreme diet, there are things to be aware of when it comes to it. And we always tell people to proceed with caution because lack of symptoms doesn't mean you're automatically okay. Do you feel better? Possibly. But that doesn't always mean your IBD is in a good place, which is why working with a dietitian to work through foods to slowly add into your day can be helpful, and keeping up with your lab work to see where your inflammation's at.
Yeah, and I'll add too, on a personal note, that was a big part of my story, which is why I tend to bring it up more, because I've seen it help people understand what's happening for them. Because for me, I did not present with a lot of symptoms all the time. I was going for years with very little symptoms, but very inflamed. And it definitely led me down a path of seeing a lot of more systemic things that kind of caught me off guard pretty suddenly. Because, with IBD, you get used to a certain way of feeling and it just sort of slowly builds over time. You could have underlying inflammation, which is why it's so important to have a good GI that you trust on board, or some sort of healthcare provider following you and following your inflammation to make sure it's actually under control. Okay. And number 4 is similar to number 3, and that not every symptom that you have means that you're inflamed and you've slipped up or like you're not doing well. I think a lot of people, including myself, have felt that way, where you see symptoms and you automatically think, oh no, I'm in a flare up. And, you can get this catastrophic thinking about it as a patient, where you kind of go down the spiral of what does this mean? And we definitely sort of, patients, I feel like we can often get into a blame game with ourselves on feeling like we caused the flare, but it's just not the case, because symptoms and inflammation don't always go hand in hand.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's always a big one to debunk, because it can be so immediate. And when it is immediate, it makes you want to kind of take action, and you can be a little bit more hard on yourself in those instances too.
Yeah, for sure. It's just important to know that there's a lot more detail to understanding IBD. There's different types of remission. There's different, levels of that. Your best approach when you get into that spot where you're not sure what's happening or you've seen a change is to get further testing. So speak with your doctor. Maybe they can run like a fecal calprotectin or a lactoferrin and actually see what's going on versus sitting with it and feeling fear and anxiety. And then the last one, number 5, biggest myth around IBD is that nutrition doesn't matter. And if you're here, you probably are here because you understand and know that nutrition does matter. But it's important to remember that even if you're told that by your healthcare provider, that, it doesn't have to be a cure for it to be helpful, for it to be improving someone's quality of life, for it to be improving their response to medication and improving their outcomes. So we know so much about how important nutrition is. We did a full longer video on this topic that we'll also link below. But yeah, I know it's no longer okay, or I don't even think ethical to say that it doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter.
Well, yeah, especially since one of the biggest things that our clients come to us with is the overwhelm around diet. Do this, do that, don't do that, don't do this. And it's a lot. So then to have someone sit down with you, know your health history, and be able to come up with a plan for you as to like why we want to add these things in, why we want to adjust this, and why we again want to add this in is so helpful to not only lessen the overwhelm, but to help get your health in a better position, so that you not only feel confident with what you're doing in the kitchen and in your life, but you just start to feel different too. So that's one of the key reasons why diet does matter for IBD.
Yeah, and I also want to point out, like, I think there's a lot of fear about working with a dietitian, or even, well, I already eat healthy, so I
Mhm.
don't need to go that route. But we're not talking about eating healthy when we say nutrition matters and diet matters. Majority of people with IBD are already pretty health conscious. Most of the people that come to us have already tried so many different things and are already very health aware. And healthy is a weird word to begin with. It's like, already when you have a disease, you are not, having full health in that moment. But I think we almost assign this morality piece to health, of like, I eat healthy, so I'm healthy.
Mhm.
Whereas it's not about that. When it comes to nutrition for IBD, it's more about using nutrition in a way where you can use it as a strategy to address your symptoms, where you can use it as a strategy to help with reducing inflammation overall and reducing your risk. So it's really more about that. So improving your quality of life and improving your outcomes with IBD. So not about being healthy, but more about using it as a treatment. I wanted to point out also that a lot of these things we're talking about are individualized and need to be done alongside a dietitian who can really look at your whole story and understand the most important priorities. There's so many things going on with IBD. Sometimes we have to prioritize treating nutrient deficiencies or getting enough overall, or correcting electrolytes, or reducing your symptoms at night so you can sleep. So working with someone can really be helpful in your journey, getting beyond just basic stuff and really into a customized plan for you. So if you are interested in that, please reach out, schedule a call. We're happy to chat with you through some options. So thank you for being here for our top 5 myths with IBD, and we'll see you next time.